Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. And I loved following the two incredible speakers, especially talking about the value proposition, as well as assume everyone is a genius, because we learn something from every single person that we meet. So I put together a little something called Advancing Equality Together, because what is clear, and Asfar, you brought this up before, we talk about social distancing. I actually think that we are physically distancing, but more socially connected than ever before. And so it is such a great honor to be part of this incredible group of geniuses. And with that, just to give you a brief background on who we are a female-owned business, and especially for female small business owners today in the COVID-19 moment, it's incredibly challenging as a small business to do it all, to be at home working as primary caregivers, as well as being serial entrepreneurs, needing to manage in moments of crisis. And I always look for the silver lining, because I believe when there is crisis, there's always opportunity. And how do we pivot with positivity? How do we pivot with proactivity? Because I believe that when we have these challenges, this is when we rise to the top with innovation, with creativity. And most importantly, a company alone has power, but collectively we have impact. And this is this incredible moment in time that I believe we will all look back and say, there have been some significant challenges, but there's also big opportunities. And when you look at the World Economic Forum's global goals, global goal number 17 is all about partnerships. There has never been a more important time for partnerships, private public sector partnerships, within organizations, within teams, with our customers. It is about the power of collaboration today, yesterday, and more importantly, for defining our future together. But we can't keep just talking about the problems, or as I say, we can't just admire the problems. We have to activate solutions for change. And we also have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to create accountability for that change. And that requires metrics to measure where we are, where we want to go, and then how we're going to get there. And so we know the business case. We all talk about the business case for equality. We know that diversity and inclusion is good for equality. We know that gender diverse teams are more profitable and more innovative. Organizations that embrace diversity and inclusion have higher employee satisfaction and less turnover. We know that companies that elevate women are more effective across the board. These are facts. And as a matter of fact, when you think about all that data that I just shared, 1.7 times stronger leadership, 1.4 times more sustainable growth, 1.5 times stronger growth cultures. We know that we can also add over $28 trillion to the global GDP by 2025. We also know that we see 21% higher business performance and overall employee satisfaction. And when you look in general across the board, you will see companies that are in the top quartile for gender diversity, especially on their executive teams, or more likely to experience above average profitability. And when you look at everything happening right now, women are on the front line. Countries run by women are actually more successful in times of crisis. And yet, according to the World Economic Forum, pre-COVID, it will take over 257 years to close the pay gap. 257 years to close the pay gap. And we haven't made a lot of significant change. The United States, according to the World Economic Forum's 144 countries that they measure, the United States 3 years ago was 25. Last year, 41. So we have been going backwards with all this conversation of where we are, where we're going, what we're going to do. We have not made a lot of progress. And most of it, in my opinion, comes to not holding ourselves accountable. If we want change to happen, we're the ones that have to make it happen. We talk a lot about unconscious bias. It's an unconscious bias challenge. But if we're using the word unconscious, then we are conscious. Once we're aware of the problems, it's time to take action, take those steps to move forward, to create the changes that we want to see. And when we look at the impact of COVID right now and the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on women, we are seeing tremendous inequalities, which if we thought there was a gap before COVID, that gap has just widened. And yet we do see over 87% of our healthcare support are women putting themselves on the front line. And 57% of mothers in particular saying that mental health has gotten the worst because of COVID, compared to only 32% of men. And we are seeing anxiety by the billions. I live in Los Angeles in the United States, Los Angeles, California. Anxiety by the billions, especially with working moms. And this has an impact of potentially upwards of $34 billion, the impact especially on working mothers. There was a survey that Working Moms just conducted, and it showed us that 81% of working moms said that their ability to engage in effectively working has been negatively impacted by COVID. And we are seeing reductions in salaries with furloughs and eliminations, especially at entry level, which is predominantly positions held by women, 34% of their salaries being impacted. And so if you think about the number in the United States of working moms, which is over 31 million, making on average $40,000 a year, that's how we are starting to see these numbers of the impact of potentially $34 billion, which has enormous implications and consequences on families, on employees, and most importantly, on our economy as a whole. And then when you look at countries, so the good news is what countries are starting to work on, and we're starting to see the impact. The United States came 19 with women working on peace and security index. Norway, best country for women. Japan, 30 weeks of paid leave. When we start looking at policies that matter and will help us attract and retain our best talent, I think we're going to start seeing rising to the top paid parental leave. And the one incredible thing happening with COVID, now that we're all working at home, equality starts in the home. Caregiving, shared responsibilities. If we can share the responsibilities at home, that will allow us to bring our whole selves and thrive in the workplace as well. And we see in China, Iran, we're seeing all over the place policies that are moving us forward with the ideas in our minds, the consciousness of how do we attract and retain the best talent. We start typically at 50-50 at entry level, and we fall off to less than 17% in the leadership. So not only do we need to close the gaps around parity, closing the wage gap, around pipeline, not just filling the pipeline, but also creating the pathway to leadership. And then how do we look at the policies that we are all creating within our organizations, spending a lot of money, on those policies, but potentially the ability to reallocate funding into policies that will truly make a difference to ensure that we have diversity, inclusivity, equity, and overall equality in the workplace today. And so if we all started thinking about how can we become a quality fit, we all work out so that we can stay healthy. How do we stay healthy with equality inside of our organizations? Leadership, yes, it gets pushed from the top down, but every one of us has that responsibility to do our part and make a difference, big or small. But in order to become a quality fit, we need to have a conscious mindset. We need to eliminate that excuse of unconscious bias. And we need to start putting rigorous tools in place to measure where we are, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there. And sometimes it's just not that complicated. Where there's a will, there's a way. In crisis, and also bringing forward what is that new normal. I hope the new normal is going to be a better normal, where we are all connected with one another, activating those partnerships for change, and most importantly, realizing that equality starts now. There is no better time than to close the door and open a new one for success as we move forward. And so I am really happy to take any questions. I just wanted to give a quick little overview of where we are today and where we could be tomorrow if each of us step up to the plate. So, shukriya. Thank you.
So Shelley, if I may ask a question, how do you see the new normal shaping up, especially in the wake of, or especially keeping in mind the diversity of inclusion? Do you see the practice changing as we move ahead in any significant way or in any better way, or do you think we are going to go back? So what's your take on this?
I'm very well known as a chief troublemaker. I break all the rules that don't make sense and I create the new ones. So I hope we don't go back. I think going back is, I never go back, I always go forward. And I think that, forward for us is incorporating a lot of the connectivity and the relationships that we're now creating, even through virtual. And I think that will help a lot, especially with working moms, from flexibility of schedule. The Zoom, it will never replace in person. And hopefully the day we can shake hands again and be face to face. But I think that there's, right now, Zoom is an or. I think in the new world, and I hope in the better normal, it will become an and we will start incorporating some of these new tools that we are all using today to connect in between and create more flexibility and mobility and accessibility to women, especially that are primary caregivers. I think this is a wonderful new solution that has always been. It's like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. She could have always gone home, but didn't know to click her heels. We've always had this, but we never embraced it. And so I think this is a moment of embracing the things that are working quite well and not losing that momentum as we move forward. We've also created some tools to assess wage gap. So pre-COVID, being able to look at where companies are from their pipeline as well as for their parity gaps, looking at the gaps across the board. We have now added a new filter, which allows us to look at the COVID adjustments so that we can be aware of where the gap will now be. And I believe it will widen. The shame will be to go backwards and just accept the widening gap as the new norm. We need to be more proactive today. We need to pivot with proactivity to ensure that when we go forward, we will close that door and open the new one. And so these tools allow you to create what if scenario planners so that we can be conscious of the choices that we now need to make.
We have another question, and it says, we talk a lot about women empowering women. I would think that we all need to find for equality and not for one gendering or empowering. What is your take on this?
Gender equality is not a female issue. It's a social and economic issue. And so, yes, we do need women supporting other women. Historically, women have been so competitive with other women because there's been such a scarcity of jobs at the top. But women are 50% of the population. We can't just support each other. This is a leadership issue. Caregiving is still predominantly a female issue. Leadership is still predominantly by default a male issue. but it isn't about men or women. It is about all of us. It's a leadership issue where we all need to take the actions and support one another to create the changes that we want to see in the workplace, and certainly to unlock all of the global goals across the board. It is about, doing this together and using a new lexicon. When we say we need, male ambassadors or male champions, we're actually putting more power in the hands of men. Men didn't create this problem, neither did women. This is a leadership inspirational moment for all of us to step up to the plate working together. Madeleine Albright says, women that don't support other women deserve a place in hell. We say that women that support other women deserve a place in heaven. So that is definitely a very necessary ingredient, though.